Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Biotech Project. We have another great episode in line for you today. We're going to be speaking today with a great guest about career empowerment and how you can get ready for your very own career in the biotech industry or to change or propel the career that you already have. So we are super excited to be back with you. Again, feel free to follow us on social media under the Biotech Project. You can find it on almost all of your platforms, or you can reach out to us at hosts@thebiotechproject.com. So without further ado, Scott, who are we with today?
Yeah, I'm super excited to have with us Andrea Pagnozzi. Andrea is an experienced leadership and development expert. She's been in the life sciences industry for over 20 years, and then she transitioned into from leadership and development into the coaching world, where she's now the CEO and the principal coach of Flint Coaching and Consulting. So we're super excited to have Andrea here, and I've personally had an opportunity to work with Andrea in the past, and can't wait to hear from her today. So we'll be back with Andrea in a second.
You want to break into and navigate your career in the pharma and biotech industry. We know how to teach you. This is the Biotech Project. From sales to medical affairs and everything in between, we're talking about it. No matter how you got here, from here to your next role is up to you, and we're here to help. You'll hear from guests in every role, from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring managers. The Biotech Project. Here are your hosts, Scott Resnick and Dr. John Walsh.
All right.
Awesome. Welcome back. Again, super excited to be here today with Andrea. Andrea, welcome to the show. Love to have you today.
Thanks so much. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you. For me, this is something I've really been looking forward to. We're in the midst of a very interesting time in the world right now with COVID and everything else going on, and we've seen so much transition and change in not just our industry, in so many industries. And really, the insight that can be gleaned from having you on today, I think, is really going to be valuable for folks that are listening in. So, Andrea, why don't you just give us a little introduction to you and your own personal career and where you are today?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity again. And it's a pleasure to be here. I've had the opportunity to listen to some previous episodes, and it's amazing what you guys are doing. I really applaud it. I myself am a career success and empowerment coach. I became a full-time coach in mid-2021 after 25 plus years in the industry of biotech, life sciences, medical device. I ran the gamut. I started out in pharmaceuticals right here in the Boston area as a hospital development manager. That's what they call it, HGM. We have to have those lovely acronyms, right? But it was really a hospital specialist. Yeah. And had a very successful career, vertical career, and from sales, you went into training. I fell in love with training and development, went out to become a manager for many years, loved that too, got to build highly successful teams. But the part of management that I really loved was coaching and developing other people. And training and development ended up being a mainstay for me for about the greater part of a decade. And through that, I wanted to make the leap to organizational development because I wanted to reach a broader audience, not just the commercial teams, but everybody, the medical affairs team, organizational effectiveness, ops, all those people. And making that leap in a corporate environment when you've only had commercial training experience, doesn't matter the accolades on the wall. It's like jumping from the south rim to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. They just don't see it. So I ended up investing in my education and getting an executive coaching certification. Started doing it as a side hustle in like 2014, started to implement some of the strategies in a corporate environment to build my trust, build my equity. And then during the Great Resignation that you just attributed to this lovely pandemic we find ourselves in, I had a ton of people, mostly women of color who had come out of the workforce to remote school children, to deal with family issues, that sort of thing. And oh my God, I don't have a resume. I haven't interviewed in 15 years. What the heck do I do? So I started getting, the phone was ringing off the hook. I started getting all these calls, and I thought this might be a good time to pivot directly into doing what I really want to do. And so that's what I did in mid 2021. And now I've taken on the responsibility of also helping the flip side of the Great Resignation, which is really leaders that are trying to stop the bleeding of this mass exodus they find themselves in, retain people and build their skills.
So, Andrea, one of the things you mentioned is the certification that you have. Here at the Biotech Project, one of the things that we're really trying to help is to offer different options for people about what the future of their career could hold. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what was the certification, what certification was it? What's the process like? How does somebody get into doing that? Where do you learn about it? Just maybe give us that background.
Yeah, so it dates back to about 2013, before it was cachet to have a coach. Somebody recommended it to me at my alma mater. I was going for my MBA, and they said, if you're really into organizational development and leading leaders and building and empowering people, maybe you want to get a coach to find out how you can make that leap from commercial training to organizational development. They may make it easier for you. I hired this phenomenal woman. Unfortunately, she still isn't practicing, but she influenced me. In about 6 sessions in, she said, all right, I'm going to do something very unprofessional here, because ethically we don't lead people into a direction. And she said, have you ever thought about career coaching yourself? And I thought, she said, it might actually build your acumen in how you coach and develop people on your team, in an organization, influence people to get other jobs or to get promotions. And I thought, she may be on to something. So I started to research, and pretty much every graduate school program that has a business administration program, they are now adopting some sort of certification for professional coaching. There are what are called ICF accredited schools. I went to one of them. It sounds like the WWF. And to be honest with you, it can be that way sometimes, because you're wrestling with people about their own personal space. But the ICF is the International Coaching Federation. And right now, we're in a place as coaches where you don't have to be certified. However, having come from the biotech and pharmaceutical world, I learned very early on, it's a highly, constraint, compliance, regulatory constraint, organizational belief that you have properly certified people going out, rightfully so, in front of customers and selling to them ethically and on label. So I said to myself, I need a certification. Even if you're saying I don't need it, I need it. For me, I need it. So I went to a company, it's sort of like one of these situations where you go and you interview different schools, like a school fair when you're a young kid and you're trying to figure out where to go to college. They have these coaching fairs, and the different schools, Columbia School of Business, Kellogg, all of these programs have it. And this tiny little table in the corner was called IPEC. And it's literally...
It was hiding out there for you,
It was
right?
hiding. And I thought, this is the one for me. I don't know why. It just spoke to me. I'm a pretty intuitive person. And it turns out it's one of the #1 international coaching organizations for certification. It's very cost effective. There are a lot of biotech and pharmaceutical companies that are now going back to paying for people to further their education, tuition reimbursement and the like. So I was able to get tuition reimbursement from a previous company to get my certification.
Wow.
And I do feel that it raised the bar in terms of the training that I was providing, in terms of the coaching I was providing my teams, and in terms of differentiating me when it came time to throw my hat in the ring for, promotions.
How
That's
long
awesome.
was the program from start to finish, and was it full-time, part-time? What type of, time commitment was needed?
Yeah, every program is a little bit different, but ours at IPEC was done on weekends and it was done quarterly, just like a virtual education is done now.
Mhm.
Most of it was online. And what we were able to do was do certification using what back in the day was WebEx, which would be kind of like we're doing right now with Zoom or Microsoft Teams. They still do it that way. So it's
Sure.
the one industry that I don't think has had to migrate. They're probably the example of what to do in a virtual world. But it took me a year and a half, soup to nuts. You have to have so many hours of accreditation to get the certification. So you're actually put with a mentor coach, a peer coach, and then you can take on non-paying clients to get the hours you need for accreditation.
That's
Cool. I
awesome.
mean, we all remember the day, right, when everything was live. So we're living in this time that's so different now. Where I remember having Zoom meetings or whatever platform the company I was at was using, and it was so rare for somebody to turn on a camera. And I think almost every meeting we have today has a camera. So
Yeah.
what a metamorphosis! So doing a program like this virtually, in the past, I'd say maybe you lose out a bit. But I think in a case like this, we're so used to this world. I don't think you lose out. I think it's great and it's convenient too.
Yeah, it's opened up, I think, opportunities for people to do things that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do previously. Time commitment, going into a class versus not. I think we're all seeing that now in places we wouldn't think it. My son just completed driver's education, and it was 100% virtual, which I thought was interesting. So, it's an
So
amazing
we should keep
transition.
off the road
He
around
doesn't
there.
have
Is
his
that where you go?
license. He doesn't have his license yet. You know, we won't get into that. That's a whole other episode. So, let me ask you a question, Andrea. I'm super excited to hear about what's going on today in this the consulting side of what you do, but I don't want to miss out on the opportunity of having somebody that really was such an experienced leadership and development person, in industry. You know, what's your thoughts on opportunities in leadership and development today? I know. Um, I love training. I love being a field trainer. I've had a lot of opportunities to be a field trainer. And what was nice there is I could still do my day to day job, but then have an opportunity to help and mentor people and, share experiences and work with training and development. That was a lot of fun. What about people that, may want to go into training and development full time? What does that look like maybe yesterday compared to today with changes? Um, you know, virtual opportunities are much more robust today, not having to relocate. What can you share for our audience on training and development?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the proverbial head. It used to be that if you couldn't relocate, you were kind of out of the mix. You weren't even considered. Nowadays, with everything being virtual and proving to companies you can be equitable in building a robust training program without having to pull people away from their families for long periods of time, save an abundance of money on travel, and still be very equitable and get people out the door quickly. I think that's one of the challenges that companies are having, however, is in order to be effective in a virtual world in front of customers, you need to train for the virtual world. And a lot of the curriculum hasn't changed. A lot of the sales messaging hasn't changed. The workshops are still the same. And that's providing that you're in a face to face interaction with a customer. But even that has changed. So, where I see a lot of need for evolution and need for differentiation are people that are particularly good at that, who've shown, as you mentioned, in peer to peer examples on a team environment, that they're pretty engaging in front of a screen, that they're able to carry a conversation and keep people informed. Because it's very difficult. People can multitask. I could be on, 40 different websites right now. You guys would never even know.
Yeah.
I'm not. But that's
Thank
what's
you.
happening with today's learner. With today's learner, they're very scattered. Plus, we have a younger generation. We have Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Zers that are digital natives. So they know how to be really connected and sometimes need to be really connected. It's almost like virtual ADHD.
Yeah.
In order to stay focused, they have to have multiple things going on, and companies are not privy to that. So we need to account for two things: cultivating talent that understands how to train in a virtual framework, but also keeping people engaged in a virtual framework.
So, do you see this virtual training? So, somebody's onboarded at a company, say, do you see keeping that traditional where you fly out for a week after you've done home study coming back, or do you see that it's been so effective and cost effective to keep things virtual? Do you see that continuing moving into the future? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and time will tell, right? But the reality is, I think that what doesn't go away is that hand to hand, face to face, whites of the eyes in the person, sort of enveloping people into a corporate culture in the culture itself. What I see a lot of companies doing effectively is the initial training, product training, onboarding, orientation, like with HR and that sort of stuff. Is done in person, but it's done after the product training and after sort of the assimilation into your new role. Bringing people in, 60 to 90 days out after they've gotten their feet wet a little bit, their nose is bloodied a little bit, there's more robustness to bringing them in when that happens. And I think that is what's starting to come back. And they're coming back in smaller groups to stay compliant with, some of the, pandemic rules of the role. But I do think having those small integrated groups makes for better learning too. So just something from a training vet.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we see how the COVID world evolves, right, we'll see where we go next with bigger or more frequent live events. But I personally, trainings that I've been in and certainly meetings, just that informal time that you get sitting, chatting with colleagues, the discussions between meetings, the things that occur over lunch, the experiences that people have that they can share, just telling stories about how they got bloodied up or how they overcame a challenge are super effective to be personal. So I think we've done a great job with the the virtual world, but it's going to be really awesome, hopefully, to see us do a little bit more of that in person as we can as well.
It's invaluable. It's experience that you can't get with just a talking head at the front of a room. You really need to feel that corporate culture surrounding you. Right now, I will tell you, about 5 years ago, the average turnover time in biotech and pharmaceuticals, this is a real statistic, it was probably about 3 to 5 years before somebody would want to go to greener pasture, seemingly greener pasture somewhere else, right? Or get recruited into another position and jump ship. Today, it's 7 months. 7 months. And a lot of that stems from the fact that there's less hiring because there's fewer drugs being approved. There are more concentrated efforts to virtually sell in areas that are still respondent to that. So they don't want to backfill roles where doctors aren't partaking in virtual opportunities. It doesn't make good business sense. But also the fact is that people are not feeling like they're part of a company. And that has gone away. So when they do the exit interviews, this comes up all the time. When I interview my clients, they'll say to me, just didn't like the corporate environment. In fact, I didn't really understand it because everything was virtual. I never got anything in the mail. Everything was communicated poorly. I didn't have a good rapport with my manager. All of these things are missing in a virtual world. So I agree with you, John, that really we need to bring that back as quickly as we can.
So what's your advice then when people say that? How should they stay best connected to their company? I mean, clearly it's a two-way street, right? Mm-hmm. Companies can get a great lesson from this too and figure out other ways to connect their employees. But so if a client were to come to you and say, yeah, but I want to be able, when I take my next role, to be connected to that company, what are some things that they can think about doing?
Yeah, I think it really is a super sleuthing event to have an interview now, right? It's not just about, are you the best candidate for a role? It's very much, is this the right thing for me in my career? Is reporting to this manager, is being a part of this company, is selling this product the right thing for me to do, the right next step in my career? So people are asking more questions than just a show and tell in an interview. What I urge my clients to do is to ask questions proactively about the culture you want. First thing I tell them to do is do extensive research on the company. Reach out to the people who have been impacted by decisions they've made. So people in your network who've worked at those companies. Look online. See how many jobs are posted. So is there a lot of bleeding going on with the company? When you're tapping into your network, ask things like, what keeps you up at night? What are the things they do you can't stand? Here's what I'm dealing with. Would I be facing that at this company? Because as I said earlier, it's assumed greener pastures, but every company has their issues, right? So getting to know those things going into an interview, because I'll tell you what, companies are doing their research on you. I do programs with colleges and universities all the time. And in the last year, I probably implemented 16 graduate programs where I'm talking to them about setting up their resume, going on interviews, all of these things. And the first thing I tell them to do is I said, give me the juniors, the people that aren't about to graduate, but give me the college juniors, because that's when they need to start cleaning up their social media profile. And I don't care if you're a junior in college, a grad student, or you're 45, 50 years old. You need to clean up your social media platform. You don't need to be talking about politics. You don't need to be twerking and doing crazy things. You don't need to be doing a keg stand at a fraternity party, right? Those are the things that are deal breakers, because what companies are now doing, they're admitting this in many industries, especially biotech and pharma. If you're going to represent their company, they want you to have a good social profile, an equitable social profile. So I tell people that that's the first thing to do research on them, because they're going to do it on you. The second thing I tell them to do is I no longer ask for resumes up front. I've gotten wise to the fact that if somebody is in a bad mindset, they've gotten passed over for yet another promotion, they've gotten laid off, they're furious about this pandemic and they're sequestering and all of these things, they're coming in with a mindset that's sort of negative. And so they'll hand me this resume that's either dusted off from 20 years ago and totally obsolete, or it's this, I don't know, very antiseptic approach to who they are. It doesn't differentiate them in any way. So I don't ask for their resume. If they send it to me, I don't open it, because I don't want it to influence how I'm going to draft their resume for them. And I put them on a mock interview in our first session. And I sit down with them for 45 minutes, no more, no less. And I just rapid fire questions at them. Tell me about where you went to school. Why did you choose that school? What did you major in? Did you do anything in your career related to that major? All of these questions. And I start to build a narrative with them, and it serves two purposes. First of all, it helps me populate a good resume draft for them to react to. And the second thing it does is it helps me identify where are they strong in interviewing and where are they not. And so if I'm talking to you, Scott, and something comes up and you tell me something that really stands out, that's really going to differentiate you against the John Walshes of the world, right? That are vying for the same job, I'm going to say to you, hey, Scott, stop right there. Say that again. And whatever it is, I'm going to make you say it once, then twice. And then the third time, I'm going to have you write it down. Because 80% of the things that are said that are written down are acted upon. If you just repeat it, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to retain it. So I get you to do that because it's building a narrative. It's building an elevator speech. And then finally, what I do is once we have a solid resume and a solid cover letter, and we have a solid list of roles you want to apply to, and we practice the interviews and perfected them, and we do a lot of rehearsing with that, I have them prepare for the long game and prepare for an elevator speech. That's what we always called it in training, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
right? And so that elevator speech looks something like this. If I'm introducing myself to somebody who may be an influential part of my network and I don't know them, I'll say, "Hi, I'm a career success and empowerment coach. My name is Andrea Pagnozzi. I'm fiercely dedicated to helping place people on either side of the Great Resignation into an optimal part of their career, realizing their career potential. So I've told you in 2 seconds, two sentences in 30 seconds rather, that who I am, what I stand for, and what I want to do, what I'm passionate about. So that's the elevator speech. The long game is all the practicing we've been doing, because you know what interviewers are going to do. So they're going to dig into things that stand out in the resume. Incongruent career pathing. I was a director once, now I'm an associate director. Tell me about that. I never went to do anything that I went to school to do. How is that going to help me now?
Sure.
Layoffs, time frames. I've only been at the last 4 companies for an average of 7 years. That's not true, but for some people it may be.
Sure.
Some people it could be 5 months, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to dig into those things. So be prepared for the long game and for the elevator speech.
Can I ask you a question about that? So, what I'm finding really amazing is early in my career, I made a couple of very strategic moves after, shorter time frames, but I was able to grow my career progressively. And it was always a big question was, we're not so sure. You made a couple of moves after a year and a half. And today we see people, like you said, staying at a company for 6, 7 months and then moving on. So has there been a shift where it's acceptable as long as people are trying to better themselves, or, kind of what's your thought on that?
Yeah, there's a shift all around, and companies are learning how to navigate it more respectfully. I think before COVID, that was not the norm. And so it did stick out like a sore thumb. It could be a big red flag. Today, it's not as much of a red flag, but what I tell people to do, and this is part of that practice with the interviewing, is to be proactive about it.
Yeah.
Be proactive about any of the things that could be potentially red flags so that they don't have to ask about it. Right. So that's absolutely a shift that I'm seeing.
So,
And Andrew, go ahead, Scott.
I'm sorry, just to follow up to that, because we didn't really, we've mentioned the Great Resignation a few times. Why don't you define the Great Resignation for us? Because I think that, that's important.
Yeah, it's really in some industries more of a mass exodus than a resignation. We make it sound so beautiful, but it's not. To some companies, it really means closing their doors because they can't sustain the employment or maintain the employment. But what it really is I think this is an awakening. I don't mean to sound all spiritual on people, but I really think it's a individual awakening of what they're going to put up with, what they're not going to put up with. I think the pandemic has made us realize that life is short, time is short, and the time that I spent, which is 85% of my waking hours in my career, better be time well spent, where I'm living my truth, living my passion. And if I'm working for a company that does not support that and it's not fulfilling, why bother? I see something very interesting happening. It used to be an old adage where if you had a job, it was easier to get another job. But I see people in this Great Resignation completely dropping the mic and walking out. There is nothing to fall back on. And then they call me. They go, "Oh my God, what have I done? I need a resume, stat. I need to know where to go next." But what I've been trying to empower people to do is to really tap into, what do you enjoy doing? Because if this isn't for you, don't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. Maybe good money. And this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing people take steps back in their career, side steps in their career, and going to jobs where they're making $20, $30, $50, $60,000 less.
Wow.
Just to maintain some semblance of normalcy in their life. It's an interesting fix. So if I had to define the Great Resignation, it's the Great Awakening of people really realizing that I need to be living my truth career-wise and live up to my potential and stop allowing companies to push me around and this and that and the other thing.
Yeah, that's an awesome observation about what's happening. And I think it has to serve a bit of a wake up call to corporate America and to employers, right? That people value quality of life, they value career progression, they value development, they value their life as a person just as much as they value the need to have a paycheck. So I think again, there's that two-way street, right? It's important for the companies to also see what's happening out there, and I guess the progressive ones will.
Yeah, they'll be more flexible now with work days, work hours, where they can be. They're more apt to agree to a location free assignment, which we touched on earlier. One of the funny things that a lot of companies are doing, and I think it's a direct correlative to the Great Resignation, is when people quit, they had to pay unpaid vacation time. So to bypass that, a lot of companies are like, positioning it as a benefit to have unlimited vacation, knowing full well that people aren't going to take more than 3 weeks, and they still have to get vacations approved. So it's sort of a misnomer to say, hey, it's unlimited, because it really isn't. But I see them doing some pretty creative things. And if they're really, one of the things that has always been a challenge for me in this industry, and this is a great time to bring this up, is we adopted this mentality of customer centricity. Everybody was customer centric. We were laser focused on the customer. If you're customer centric, wouldn't you then be people centric in general? But to a detriment, many companies,
right?
You should be, because customers are people, right? And the customer's always right. And I get all of that. But the reality is, and for some of our industry, it's the patient centricity, but they're people too. But the people that are bringing the products to the patients and to the customers aren't always being treated as fairly. And so I do find a lot of biotech and pharma companies stepping up to the plate with this mentality and saying we need to be people centric in general. And it's becoming one of their objectives and key results factors on their annual reports. So I'm happy to see that happening, because they're starting to do more to invest in their people. What's coming back is investing in people's 401k a little bit meatier, investing in people's time off to have them have not just time off, but designated volunteerism time, where they give back to the communities they live in and they get credit for it, or bringing back tuition reimbursement. There's a lot of that going on. Yeah. So I do see more of that happening, but what's gone away, and these companies that still do this, it's so antiquated, is when they tout number one place to work, voted consistently for the past 3 years, as published in Boston Magazine or in the New York Times, number one best place to work as a woman. Have you talked to the women that are in the businesses? Because I don't know if they're the ones being asked these questions or where you're getting this accolade. It really, it's interesting, because the companies that tout themselves as the number one, in many instances, number one place to work for women, number one place for career potential, number one place for XYZ, that's usually the number one reason why a lot of people leave, is because they find out that that isn't true. So those are the companies that you really need to dig into. If you see that there's a lot of jobs posted, are you posting a lot of jobs because it's a launch period? Or are you posting those jobs because they're vacant for a reason? So we talk about this a lot in real estate, where it's a buyer's market or it's a seller's market, or in finance, it's a bear market. In our market today, in employment, it's a candidate's market. They run the show, not the companies. So dig deep.
It's interesting. I don't want to mention the website by name, but there's a website that a lot of people in our industry go to, and it's filled with a lot of complaining and moaning and whatnot. And people always used to say to me, why do you bring up something that you may have seen on that website? And the honest truth is, that's probably the worst you're going to hear about something. So if you really want to see what the worst of something is, why not go to a resource like that? Like, I think it's almost foolish not to admit that people want to know what they may or may not hear about a position or an organization or an industry, whatever. So I think I think going back to your point you made earlier about really researching things, it is important to not only speak to somebody that's a superstar at an organization and has nothing but the greatest things to say, but maybe also speak to somebody that's struggling a little bit and where those struggles come from.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
fair representation of what's going on in the climate. And it can't always be roses. We get that. We
yeah.
get that we're going to have to navigate challenges. But if we know about them ahead of time, we'll be better prepared. And I can name another site that a lot of people go to. People call it the Zillow of employment, is Glassdoor, right? Am I
Yep.
getting a fair
Sure.
offer, right?
Yeah.
The reality is, to your point, it's a better gauge than just flying in blindly. Not everybody's hiring a career coach that can help them navigate, negotiate. But those that do end up, I've seen people, this is absolutely honest. In today's world, this proves that it's a candidate's environment. I saw somebody go from a senior manager to a director level role in one leap. That's
Wow.
unheard of.
Wow.
So if you interview properly, if you have the right things on your resume, if you have done your homework, if you have the network, if you position yourself favorably in a competitive landscape, these things can happen. But you need to learn how to make those negotiations happen, because she was interviewing for an associate director role and she got a director role. So, and a pay increase. So the way that you negotiate these things, companies are being more flexible with that too. So to go back to John's question about what are companies doing to lighten the load and to stop the turnover and to retain people, is they're having better pay discussions at offer and throughout tenure.
So follow up to that, and we've talked a little bit about personal development, what people can do working with you and whatnot. I'm very interested on the flip side. So what conversations that you're having with organizations and what the organizations are saying. I know being in commercial, one of the things that years ago we used to hear was, well, the only thing that's guaranteed is your salary and bonus or sales incentive. People would complain maybe they weren't fair, whatnot, and the pushback you'd hear from an organization is, well, that's incentive, or well, that's above and beyond and not guaranteed, and where maybe it is made to be difficult to get to reward people or whatnot, and obviously the people that are in the front of that don't like hearing that and didn't understand it. Um, are you seeing, and when you're speaking to people about what's keeping people there, a change in some of these sentiments? And what do you advise organizations that are trying to find ways to retain top talent and not have turnover?
Yeah, I see a couple of companies making that shift, but not enough. I'll be honest. I don't see that. That's still incentivization. It's still the carrot they dangle, especially for salespeople. And with fewer products getting approved and fewer big drug launches and all of that, it's fewer and further between that you have a share of voice mentality where you have 50 different reps selling 50 different drugs and all of those things. So there's less opportunity to make the money as a factor. So what I do see them doing, which some companies have done all along, but not every company. If you didn't make 75% of your incentive, you didn't get anything. What I'm seeing is more of a gradation of the bonus structure. So from 60 to 75, you get this. From 75 to 85, you get this. Or they will reward in different ways. They're finding different ways to reward and recognize people. What I don't like and how I advise is when they do these token appreciation days and they send the swag out that nobody's ever going to use, right? That is money that to the company could be valuably put into things like tuition reimbursement, could be what I think I'm trying to convey to leaders is to incentivize through asking the audience what empowers them. What is a towel may not be a good incentive or a good way to establish community, But the meaning behind it, taking time off, instead of giving them a towel, why don't you give them a day off, an extra day off? Shut down at noontime on Fridays. A lot of companies are doing that. More companies are adopting things like from Memorial Day to Labor Day, they have Friday half days. Things of that nature that the company has listened to the people. We're overworked. We are stressed out. We can't do more than we're doing, and with whatever vacancies they have, that business, that work doesn't go away, so it gets put on the shoulders of people left behind. So give them an extra day off. Don't spend the money on the tchotchke that doesn't matter. Give them something that means something to them, and give them ideas of things to do. Give them an Amazon gift card to do something with their family. Give them a Grubhub card every once in a while. I do see managers are incentivizing more at the local level than they ever have before with kind of cool things like that. Used to be that the companies would be like, well, we have to report all that. People are doing it out of their own pocket because they care about their people. So that I'm seeing. But yeah, the true incentivization, I think for legal reasons, and tax equity reasons, there's reasons why they can't really do more than they do with that. But I am seeing some of the gradation of payouts even in down years.
So Andrea, one of the most important things that we talked about is a lot of the ways that you are able to interact with people to help their careers. So I'd love to switch gears just for a second. I know that Scott had mentioned that you're the owner, operator, and principal at Flint Coaching. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, what services you're doing, and maybe tell our audience about how they can reach out to you. Because I don't know about you, Scott, but this 40 some odd minutes has been incredibly enlightening for me. So I can only imagine what you're able to do one-on-one specifically for people. So have at it.
You're very kind. So yes, I own a company called Flint Coaching. Some people have been like, why isn't it Pagnozzi Coaching? Pagnozzi is too hard to say, but it also doesn't mean anything. Flint, this takes you back to 8th grade science class. You remember the thing we used to use to light the Bunsen burner? That's called a flint. We use it now for camping. But I was sitting there camping with my husband and I'm trying to get a gotcha name. And I'm like, Flint, that's it. It's steel on iron. It creates a spark. And that's what I'm doing for clients on both sides of the Great Resignation. So if it's a leader who's trying to stop the bleeding and retain their people and sharpen their, what I call C skills, and there's 6 of them, connect with your people, communicate early and often, commit to things and don't fall back on them, coach people where they need, champion people where they need, and be clear. Those are the 60 skills that I've noticed great leaders master. So I work on building those skills with leaders. And then on the other side of the Great Resignation, people that are looking to propel their career, many people are starting to open up entrepreneurships. We saw 4.3 million people leave the workforce in August and November of last year alone. And where did the 8+ million go? Well, many of them opened up a business to do Etsy stuff and all kinds of creative things, right? Yeah. So I help those entrepreneurs make the transition, but I also help people in the biotech and pharma world advance their careers. I did it myself. I've helped other people do it. My years in training and development only help there. And I have people that set up a 45-minute complimentary session. You can get to that on my website. It's www.flintcoachingllc.com. And you'll note, set up a spark session with me, a complimentary session, free of charge, no obligation. We sit down and talk about what your passion is. We have a visioning conversation. And a lot of people come to me going, I want to do this, I want to do that. And they'll come out of the conversation with something already to go on. So I like to have that quick win, right? To get people to realize I mean what I say. If I'm going to help you with your career, it's not about the money. for me. It really is. It's not altruism. I really want to see you get ahead in your career. So I work with them for a period of 3 to 6 months if they're a career seeker, because it's all about quick and hustle with them and get them to where they need to be fulfilled in their career. And with leaders, it's a bit of a longer process. 6 to 12 months is usually the time frame that I work with clients on that end to really kind of take what they're really good at and embellish that, and then to fix the gaps that may be existent.
So, I think one of the reasons why the project exists, the Biotech Project, is to provide resources, especially for people that are looking for opportunities or trying to figure out what comes next, and get from here to there, and to do it in a way that doesn't impact them financially. But I think it's important to highlight that there are times where it really is worthwhile to work with somebody, because you're going to accomplish something that you just may not be able to accomplish on your own, and that there's a big difference there. And I think this is one of the great examples of where that brings value. I do want to ask you one last thing, and then we're going to wrap up. So I read an article, and you were kind of hinting towards some of these things in our conversation, but I read a really interesting article. So years ago in our industry, there was this term family, right? So we're a family, we're not a company, we're family this, we're family that. But the article went on to say how family doesn't turn its back on people usually. Family doesn't make decisions that would have such a big downstream effect simply because they may make a buck extra, and family will sacrifice to keep everybody happy, and that we need to transition, especially today, into the thought of community versus family as an organization. So if you had one, final point that you could leave our audience with that's looking at that next opportunity and keeping that in mind, what's your thoughts on that, and what would that, one last point be?
Yeah, such a great question. And I wish I could just wave a magic wand, right? And get people to think differently in an organization. And I realize there are a lot of reasons why they can't or don't. I think it really truly depends on what it is you're looking for. And if you properly define it, you need to look for that and demand it. I think if you can very often like what you do and like the people you work with, but not like the constraints of the organization you're a part of. The only people that are going to change that, Scott, are the people within the organization. The leaders need to lead, and the people need to produce. And if that mindset would just make a comeback and really bring that sense of community and sense of family, that we're all on the same page, we're all trying to do the right thing for patients, man, what a beautiful place this would be. You wouldn't even have a podcast. You wouldn't, right? So I think it comes down to the individual. Demand what you seek, because that which you focus on expands. I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, I can't think of a better way to end this episode. And honestly, I really hope you'll come back and join us again, because I just feel like we've got so much more that we could get into. This has been unbelievable. I really hope everybody visits the episode page on our website, www.thebiotechproject.com, because Andrea's profile will be there underneath the episode. And more importantly than that, all the different ways that you can connect with Andrea on LinkedIn and Twitter and her website. And Andrea, I know you also do a podcast, so I want to make sure that we put up a link to your podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, this was unbelievable.
So much fun.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So much fun getting to
really
talk
great.
to you. Thank you both.
Yeah, but as I said, I learned so much on the episode. And I think as soon as I get off, I'll be heading to my social media. Scott, we have to get rid of the keg stand pictures really quick. So thank you for all the tips. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. And don't forget to follow us, jump on our website, and check out our social media. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to the Biotech Project. Scott and John have 50 years of combined expertise, with roles that have covered everything from frontline sales to senior vice president of medical affairs. Scott and John are industry veterans. equipping you with knowledge from guests in every role from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring managers. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten some useful and practical information. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, check out the website at www.thebiotechproject.com. And for questions and comments, send an email to hosts@thebiotechproject.com. See you next time.